Oh my gosh, I am so excited to be back with all of you again this week for another phenomenal episode of the Your Blank What Now podcast. My name is Marcy Nettles and I am your host and our guest today. Oh my gosh. I've been following him on LinkedIn. I've actually been doing a little bit of social stalking here because he is so amazing in his mindset, his strength, and his decision to just be victorious in every aspect of his life and not just himself, but to be able to actually bring others with him. And so today's special guest is Brian Bogert. He truly believes that there's a sleeping giant in every human, awakening those giants within and turning them into legends by helping individuals grab just what's out of their grasp is Brian's purpose in this life. Brian is a heart surgeon without a blade. I love that. That is amazing. He does not start outside with what you need to do. He starts inside with who you are. In a world that is disconnected, Brian is revolutionizing how individuals, leaders, and entrepreneurs deeply connect with their authentic selves to achieve the best version of themselves. As a human behavior and performance coach, speaker, and business strategist, Brian teaches disruptive strategies on how to create sustainable growth and lasting change personally and professionally. His life philosophies on how to embrace pain to avoid suffering, people before profits, and who before what has helped individuals and companies discover and activate their limitless potential. You can literally feel Brian and his team's authenticity and will be moved by their vision to impact 1 billion lives by 2045, which that just blows my mind because 1 billion is like a really big number. And I am just so inspired by you. And I am super honored and blessed to have you as the guest today, Brian. Thank you so much for saying yes and stepping into this episode today.
Absolutely. Thing is, I'm always going to help people that help other people, right? So there's not even a question about that. And I love the bio, but words are words. You guys will see what happens after we talk today. But I also appreciate the little bit of love you gave me in the beginning with your social stalking. It's a beautiful thing, and it's my pleasure to be here with you to pour my soul into your audience and hopefully elevate and empower people to realize that life doesn't have to be so dark.
No, it doesn't. And you actually, I love that you actually said that because you have experience with darkness, right? You have experience with difficult times in your life and maybe not being the norm. And I would really love for you to just share with us as vulnerably as you'd like to, how things started for you at quite a young age, creating opportunities for breakdowns that you chose to break through.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually going to ask you and anybody who's listening or watching to just close their eyes for a second. Unless they're driving, please don't close your eyes if you're driving. I want you to imagine going to a store, having a successful shopping trip, breezing through the checkout line, walking out the doors as they open. You feel the warmth of the air. You look up and see the sun, feel the warmth on your skin, and the breeze blows through your hair. You're walking to your car. You've got a little pep in your step. You're excited to go on with your day. And so you reach into your pocket, start fumbling around to grab your keys. And as you're standing next to your car waiting to unlock the door, you turn your head and you see a truck barreling 40 miles an hour right at you with no time to react. Go ahead and open your eyes.
Wow.
That's where this portion of my story begins. My mom, my brother, and I went to our local Walmart to get a 1-inch paintbrush. And as we were headed back to our car, anybody who's known me for more than 2.5 seconds knows that I've got an energy and excitement for life. So of course I was there first. I wanted to put that paintbrush to use. So I was standing there, and this was before the time when there was key fobs. So I had to wait for my mom to literally catch up, stick the key in the door. And as she was 3-4 feet behind me, there was a truck that pulls up in front of the store. And the driver and the middle passenger get out, and the passenger all the way to the right felt the truck moving backwards. So Marcy did what any one of us would do, scooted his foot on the brake, but he instead hit the gas.
Oh, no.
It was only recently that I realized, by the way, that it wasn't just he put his foot on the gas. Like if you feel a vehicle in motion, what do? You're going to raise your knee way up high and you're going to slam down on that gas. So when he missed, all that force went into the gas pedal. Combination of shock and force threw him up on the steering wheel, up on the dashboard, and before you know it, he's catapulting 40 miles an hour across the parking lot right at me with no time to react. Now we were in an end spot, so he goes up and over the median, went up over the tree in the median, hit our car, knocked me over, ran over me diagonally, tearing my spleen, leaving a tire track scar on my stomach, and continuing on to completely sever my left arm from my body.
Wow.
So there I am laying on the pavement on a 115-degree day, August 10th, 1992 in Phoenix, Arizona. And my mom and brother watch the whole thing happen, and they look up and they see my arm laying 10 feet away. Fortunately for me, my guardian angel also saw the whole thing happen. You see, there was a nurse that walked out of the store right when this took place, and she saw the literal life and limb scenario in front of her. And I'm forever indebted to this woman for her choosing to turn into action versus going on with her day. She came over and she stopped the bleeding on the main wound, and she saved my life. And then she instructed some innocent bystanders to run inside and grab a cooler, fill it with ice, and get my detached arm on ice within minutes to give me a fighting chance of saving my limb.
Wow.
Had it not been for this woman, Marcy, I either wouldn't be here with you today, or I'd be here with you today with a cleaned up stump. That's just the reality. And so I know that your listeners were probably not expecting it to go that way, right? I realize
very possibly.
I realize I have a very, very unique story. But what I've also realized in all of my time of doing this is that we all have unique stories. What's important is that we pause and become aware of the lessons we can extract from our stories, and then become intentional with how do we apply those into our lives. And we all have the ability to do that. And we also have the ability to tap into the collective wisdom of other people's stories to shorten our own curve to learning.
Yes.
And so I'll share with you 2 primary lessons, and then we'll jump in and see where we want to take it.
Okay, perfect.
The first lesson I learned pretty immediately. And it was, I learned not to get stuck by what has happened to me, but instead get moved by what I can do with it. Reality of it is we've all been stuck. We will all be stuck. It's not okay to stay there. And so there's a lot of things that we've developed to actually people understand how to move through those moments. But it's this core lesson that I realized, like, I refuse to be stuck and defined by other people's boundaries. Yeah. The second lesson that didn't hit me for a long time, but is one of my core philosophies that you talked about in the beginning, is that 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, although I was the one going through all the surgeries, although I was the one having to go to occupational and physical therapy 3 days a week, I was also being guided through the process, and I was a little bit in a fog. My parents, however, were not in a fog. You see, they were intimately aware of the unceasing medical treatments, years of physical therapy, and the idea of seeing their son grow up with the use of his left arm was a source of great potential suffering for them. So they literally willed themselves day in and day out to do what was necessary, to do what was tough, to embrace the pains required to ultimately strengthen and heal me. So whether intentional or not, what they did was they ingrained in me a philosophy and a way of living, which was to embrace pain, to avoid suffering. And I believe that when this is done correctly, it's also our path to gain freedom. So it's these 2 lessons that we've used to not only overcome this unique injury, how my business partners and I scaled our last business to over 15 million in the span of a decade, and now how we flipped that on its head as human behavior and performance coaches, helping entrepreneurs, business leaders across the world literally become more aware, more intentional, and who they already are, their most authentic selves. Because I genuinely believe that that's when magic happens and the door starts to crack to perspective, motivation, and direction. And I genuinely believe that it's when those things, it's when joy, freedom, and fulfillment can enter our lives holistically. Wow. And it's these reasons why we're on a mission to impact 1 billion lives by 2045. Because I believe that if everybody on this planet could stand up on their own 2 feet, not just confident, but convicted in exactly who they are, knowing that the world's not going to just accept them, but embrace them for exactly who they are, that is what's going to open the opportunity for vulnerability and authenticity, which are the glue that binds human connection, to be more in the forefront and allows us to truly live a better life and leave this world a better place for my kids and my grandkids.
Amen. Amen. Absolutely. Embrace what makes you different. Right? Embrace the things that are hard. I did a social post earlier. I meant to do it early yesterday morning, but we all know what happened with Facebook yesterday, right? And it was all about, hard or easy. Every single moment ends, yep. Right? Choose the hard, because it's through those, the path of resistance. Mm-hmm. Is where you're going to get to what you want and who you truly are and fulfillment in your dreams. Yeah.
Which is funny because I actually say often that nothing worthwhile comes easy. And that's the same point. But I also talk often about removing resistance and energy drain from our worlds, but it's where resistance happens that growth also takes place. Yes. And so as long as we pay attention to see ourselves wholly. So I love that you were putting that post in, because that's exactly right. It comes down to every moment, it comes down to every decision, it comes down to every breath. Yeah. And that's truly what's going to connect us to becoming who we want to become and who we actually are, versus continually going down this path of feeling stuck and unfulfilled.
And yet I see that so many people just fall into this stuckness, right? And it's like they're almost walking through life asleep. And so what you're saying is that we really have to be living consciously to be able to make those decisions, like
Yep.
fast. We have to
100%.
make,
And the reality of it is our minds process 11 million bits of information per second, but we're only consciously aware of about 40.
yeah.
So like legitimately what you just said is exactly the point, because what that suggests is that we're largely living in the unconscious.
Yes.
No wonder people feel like victims. No wonder people feel like life is fate. No wonder they feel like they have no influence or control over their destinies. Right. But when we can actually move the unconscious to the conscious, the unaware to the aware, then all of a sudden we can have influence and control over our destinies. We actually can influence the trajectory. But the problem is we can't be intentional with things that we're unaware of. So it always starts with awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said that your parents were like just completely in charge and that they just ran with making sure that they did everything they possibly could to let you have a full and complete life and being able to use both of your arms. So as a child though, how was that for you growing up? First of all, with this big hurdle that you had been placed in front of you, how was that, first of all? And you've already talked about some of the lessons, but just share a little bit about what it was like being a kid in those circumstances.
Yeah. So, the one lesson I shared about like, don't get stuck by what's happening to me, but get moved by what I can do with it. That hit me really quickly in the hospital. And so I'll start there and then I'll unpack it a little bit further through the question. I think it's impossible for any living being to have some trauma happen to them and not have the question go through their mind, why me? Right. So I'm just like everybody else, because that's exactly what happened. Right. I was feeling sorry for myself. I was wondering why me. And even at 7, I had that awareness. And, I'm laying in the ICU bed, feeling sorry for myself. And then we have families from the ICU coming up to us, other kids that are in there, and the parents are saying, we're so sorry for what happened to you. We're so sorry. What can we do to help you? What do you need? How can we serve you? How do we help you? This is so traumatic. We're so sorry. And then come to find out their kids laying in the hospital bed next to me, not knowing if they're going to live another 30 days because of their terminal illness. Right. And so outside of the immediate threat to my life, and at that moment, not knowing whether or not I would, 1, have my arm successfully reattached, 2, know whether or not I'd ever have any functional use of it, my life was secure. So perspective points us at what's important. And that's what that did, is that's what that perspective came in, and then really what happened after that is I created a pretty strong mental narrative quickly, because when you're 7 years old and you're wearing a sling, even if it's out from your body, I used to have a teddy bear that I would hold in between, because for the bone and everything to heal, my arm literally needed to be out like 90 degrees from my body, couldn't be inside like a normal sling. And, so I'd walk around and people would always ask, hey, what'd you do to your arm? What'd you do to your arm? And I got really used to seeing dropped jaws, right, when I would tell them what happened. But I also got really used to not being believed. Because when you have a 7-year-old say, well, I was run over by a truck and my arm got ripped off, most adults are like, well, that sounds like a story, right? And so what do? They look to your parent for validation. People didn't believe me on my own story. And so I realize now how that actually patterned into my life. For so long, I felt like I needed to justify and fight to be seen and understood based on who I was, because my own truth wasn't even accepted by the adults in my world outside of my parents and close family. And so what happened is I truly also got very tired of people viewing my capabilities through their lens on what they would do in my situation. I refuse to be defined by the boundaries of other people's limitations.
That's good.
And consistently, I was being put into those boxes. And so I just flipped the other direction. And I, again, went probably to the extreme, didn't realize it till years later that although it served me, it also hurt me. It was to create an intellectual narrative that I'm good, I'm strong, I'm tough, I can do anything. And I don't need any help. People didn't believe me. People were going to limit me. Why do I need them to help me? I'll do it myself. And that worked really well until it didn't. But as a kid, that was my experience for a long time. And then being very aware that I was also the only one in every room. I understand what it's like to be isolated. I understand what it's like to stand out in a crowd. I understand what it's like to be stared at and looked at. And although I don't compare that to everybody else's scenarios, I know there's a lot of other people that for different reasons, socioeconomic class, right, skin color, ethnicity, religion, belief, feels isolated and the only one in the room. It sucks. But so many of us feel that. So I get that at a very deep level. And I've fought for a long time to really establish pure human connection.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I can totally see why feeling like, well, nobody believes me. I can't depend on anyone else. So I've just got to go out and make this happen myself. Did you ever have controlling issues?
Oh, big
Issues?
time.
Yeah.
Big
Yeah.
time.
Because I could
Yeah,
see.
I've dealt with a deep level of shame that I didn't really understand for a long time, and control manifested out of that. Hands down, not even a question. And so, and I really genuinely believe that control comes from a desire to try to protect ourselves. Right. So it makes perfect sense. In fact, I've recently had this aha in this philosophy that we've been working through. I believe that the human experience is rooted in four things. I believe that we all desire to feel safe. I believe that we all desire to feel protected. I believe that we all desire to feel seen and understood. And I believe that we all desire to feel connected. Oh, by the way, the thing that we desire the most is the fourth one, but it doesn't happen without the other three. Okay. Now, I've said it this way for a long time. What I realized, though, last week, for the first time, is that it actually needs to start with protection, not safety. So here's the thing. When we don't feel safe, right, if that's the first one that leads, which is always what happens, we walk into an environment, we walk into our parents' home, we walk into a friend's environment, one that we know we're going to get triggered on, we know that we're going to get a beating on, right? What do? We don't walk in there open. We protect ourselves. We put a wall up, which also means that we're limiting what we actually want, which is connection.
Yes.
And so I realized that so often the controls in our lives, the armor in our lives is really there just to design to protect us so that we can feel safe. So instead, what I would rather people do is focus and challenge themselves to realize that they're safe just because they're clear on who they are. And if they externally focus on how do I protect others, then it actually draws connection back towards us instead of pushing it away. I've said vulnerability, right, is often protected by armor. Brene Brown talks a lot about this, right? But what I see is that the longer we carry that armor, the heavier it gets and the more it incrementally crushes us over time. It's no different as it relates to our idea and desire to connect. You even said it. Our wall goes up. We anticipate it. Guess what? That's armor, right? So we're carrying it. We're also not showing true strength actually hides behind vulnerability, by the way. So why don't we throw out the armor, assume that we're safe, and seek to protect? Because if we do that, then we can make sure the entire room and environment around us, our teams, our cultures, our families, our kids, our spouses, you name it, can feel safe through the energy we put into the environment versus feeling like they also need to protect. Because guess what? When we walk in with armor, what do they need to do?
Put
their armor right up too.
Yes.
It prevents everything we desire. So focus on protection first, safety second, making sure that you and others can be seen and understood, and connection will just naturally happen.
Oh, that is so good. That is so good. And so how did you actually go about becoming so secure and safe in who you are that you were able to put that down? And I don't know when it actually happened for you. I know that I still have to work on that on a daily basis.
I work on it every day. Every day.
Yeah.
I will tell you, there's 3 words, they're tattooed on my arm that truly center this whole concept for me. It's trust, surrender, breathe. Right? If I can trust that like the intent is good, that's there, right? I need to have my level of awareness to protect myself in case like an unforeseen attack comes in, right? Like I'm not saying just go into life like, oh yeah, I trust and assume everything's good. No, like we have to have an element of vigilance to make sure that we're not being, exposing ourselves too much. But I genuinely believe that more often than not, if I learn to trust myself, trust the people around me, if I can surrender to like what I feel I need to fight, and I can breathe through it, then this starts to come full action, right? The reality of it is like I have felt the need to fight my whole life. So many of us feel that way.
Yes.
Right? When you have to justify your own truth, you have to justify your own protection, you have to justify to be seen and understood, you're fighting. You're literally fighting opposition. But here's the thing, fighting overtakes opposition. And that actually then puts the whole cycle back in path. So let's stop fighting. Because at the end of the day, what we want to do is neutralize and diffuse opposition.
Yes.
It's not about the black and the white. It's the gift is in the gray area. And so the reality of it is it's not fighting. We need to surrender. Surrender diffuses. Love diffuses, right? And love can overtake any dark energy. And so I'll give an example on like when this clicked for me, real time. Like honestly, this is 2 weeks ago. So like to give you a perfect example of how these things creep in, and all of us are subject to it. I was at an event, went to a big event. We've been building stuff for about 18 months in a really powerful way. We had 4 speakers at this event in the lineup, about 12 speakers. We had a chance to really create momentum in this room, and we did. Okay. But the hype and the energy in the room also allowed a little bit of ego to creep in for me, triggered by my shame, which was also triggered by my insecurity. I walked into that room expecting a fight. I've got to be the opposition in this room so that I can neutralize and diffuse the negative toxicity in this industry. And I need to infuse so much love in this. But guess what? When you go too far in any direction, it can take over. So it was purely rooted in high intent, but it was also rooted in my insecurity and shame, and ego crept in. Okay, so what happened? A couple of little things took place. Okay, but I'll give one very real example. At the end of the night, there was a concert. And the mom of the guy hosting the event was actually singing a song because they debuted an album. They debuted a music, and she was singing this song. I was there, but so was a whole bunch of other people. I had a special connection with her. I wanted to run and give her a hug, right? Afterwards, just to let her know I loved her. I was so wrapped up in myself and so unaware in the moment that I didn't realize that there was a line of people waiting to give her a hug. And I did a J hook and bypassed all of them. The first person in the front part of the line cut in, literally pushed me out of the way, said, "This is my hug." I didn't see it for what it was. So what did I do? Inside, I got a little triggered. I got a little anxious. I got a little angry. Now, I didn't backlash in that moment. I literally just deferred, bounced off, and disappeared in the back of the room. But when I realized that maybe I had not seen it clearly, right? I wanted to fight. I wanted to literally be like, why did you do that? That was such a, like, what I wanted to, like, confront this person the next day and be like, how are you doing this? Because I thought it was a posturing play. I was wrong. So instead, what I did is I reflected on it. I talked to my wife about it. I processed through it. I saw it from every angle. And whether or not I did something right or wrong, I potentially created damage unintentionally.
Yes.
So what did I do? I surrendered to that. And I saw her the next morning. Went up to her and I said, "I owe you an apology." She said, "Why?" I said, "Because last night I got wrapped up in myself. I got wrapped up in the hype of the event. And I swooped in for that hug, not even realizing that you were waiting there patiently. That hug was yours, and I'm sorry." Guess what happened? What was met with opposition the day before, she leaned immediately in and gave me a hug. And then started talking about how do we collaborate. Now, again, I'm not saying this to impress. I'm saying it to impress on the point. I could have fought, or I could surrender and assume that I was trying to create repair in an anticipatory way around damage that I wasn't even sure I created. But I neutralized and diffused the whole situation and created a connection between us that's rooted in authenticity and
That's
vulnerability.
So that is amazing. That is amazing. But I'm sure that you didn't just jump right into reacting that way. So I know that there's a lot of us, me included, that feel like we're like on this crazy cycle hamster wheel sometimes. And so it's like, how when we're in the middle of this, feeling like we have to protect ourselves, feeling like we're not safe because we're not necessarily safe with ourselves. How do we first identify that we're actually in that position? And then what do we do to get to where you are?
First and foremost, stop looking externally for answers. Stop looking for strategy and tactics. What keeps people stuck is not the wrong strategy and tactics in their life. It's a combination of emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, and environmental conditioning. Period. End of story. So stop looking externally and realize that if you start studying your life, all the answers and lessons you need are already in it. And so I talk a lot about emotional triggers. And this is truly what's helped me start to see this, right? So we do have a framework that we guide people through. I'll hit it at a high level. But like for me, right, shame was the first time I started to actually unpack this. This was probably 7 years ago. So I have been actively and vigilantly fighting my own patterns for all this time. And now I'm starting to surrender to it. But what I've been doing to fight it is to bring it into a level of awareness so I can be intentional with it. So with shame, the reason I didn't identify with it is I didn't even know I was affected by shame, because until I read Brene Brown, I didn't realize that shame had 2 talk tracks. So the first one that most people identify with was just, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, right? That wasn't really my talk track. I'd be lying if I said I didn't have moments there, but like that wasn't my narrative. But when you shut that down, you show up in the arena and you're ready to go to battle, it's who do you think you are? Everything major in my life, I felt the need to apologize for and pull the throttle back in my life, because the bigger I lived, the worse I felt I was making other people feel. And it wasn't because I was rubbing it in their face. It was my own shame that was trapping me in that belief system. And so I had to first understand that. But so here's the thing, right? We need to understand what's the framework to do this. This is a really simplistic way for people to start moving through. It's called the inside out method. There's no 7-step system to success here. This is truly about you understanding yourself better. We first need to become aware of the emotion or emotional triggers that are affecting us. Is it fear? Is it guilt? Is it shame? Is it scarcity? Is it perfectionism? Is it control? Is it literally? And oh, by the way, a lot of these things are rooted in shame.
Yes.
A lot. Not all of them are, but shame is the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing because it masks itself as many of these things. And we have a very toxic shame-based society. And from the time we are born, it is literally beat into us that who we are is not good enough and that we need and should be thinking and living different ways than who we are. So it is so ingrained in this, it's hard to unwind. I'm not going to lie, it is. It's hard work. But again, like we said in the beginning of the call, nothing worthwhile comes easy. We got to become aware. When you become aware, right? I need to become aware that shame had affected my business. Shame had affected my marriage. Shame had affected the way I was showing up in the community. Shame had affected my interactions with my parents and my brother. Shame had impacted my interactions with my friends. I had to be aware of it. Okay. Shame was in my life and I was affected by shame. Second step is to own it. It's ownership. Okay. Ownership is 2 tracks. It's one, I need to own that it has not only affected my life, but I need to also understand where and how. I need to own that there's actually been impact and damage created in my life. And oh, by the way, I've probably created damage that I need to also create ownership for. Okay. So great example, shame. Okay. I'd come home. My wife would look at me and she'd be like, hey, so what are we doing with the kids this weekend? Totally innocent question, not charged, but my shame filter heard it as, you're not doing enough as a husband and father. What are we doing for our kids this weekend? And how are you going to make them a priority? So then my shame turns into defensiveness, which then turns into anger, which then causes me to react and vomit all over my wife, the 10 things I've done in the last 4 days to prove I'm a good husband and father, when that's not even what she was asking. I created damage because of my reaction, and I've caused her wall to go up because I created damage. So I have to own the fact that these emotions have actually affected and created damage in my life. And we have to create repair, which is part of ownership. So if you know that shame has impacted you in a way that's created damage in your world, right? When I unpacked this anger stuff with my wife and I literally sat down with the people in our world that were closest to us who might have felt my edge, my anger, my energy, whether it was directed at them or they were picking up on it on behalf of my wife. Either one, didn't matter. I needed to own it and I needed to attempt to repair it. These 2 steps, by the way, is where most people can get. And when I say that these next 2 steps are very difficult, it's not to say they're impossible. They are extremely possible, but they are hard. And I just have to own that, but it is absolutely possible. The third step is to unroot. We have to get to the root or roots of those core emotions, right? So for me, I needed to understand what was the antithesis of my shame and where has it patterned forward in my life, right? Where did it start? And what are the different environments that I've been in that have affected me and affected my shame in different ways? Until we get to the root, we can't do anything about it. Imagine a weed, right? If we've got a weed, what happens? We chop off the top, what happens? The root grows stronger.
Right back.
Grows right back, right? Weeds in the lawn, right? If we don't go and unplug them and actually unroot them and pull them out, and we just keep mowing over them, soon enough, we're going to have a root that's this big around with little sprouts popping out of it. And that root system just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's no different with our emotions. So what the world tells us to do is crop it off, show up, put a smile on our face. What I'm telling you to do is, no, I want you to dig down. I don't care if you have to shove a screwdriver down and twirl it around and yank the full root out, because until you do that, you can't move forward. And oh, by the way, here's the beautiful part. When you unroot something, it leaves a hole that you get to fill with new things, new patterns, new environments, new emotional triggers. Okay. The last step is movement. This is, how does this emotion move through your body? How does it move in your world? And how do you move through it? Move in your body. Great example. I told you about my anger with shame on when my wife gave that example. Came as defensiveness because husband and father is the most important role. But I'd show up in a professional environment. I talk fast and I'm loud. I don't know if you've noticed.
I love it. That's good.
How many times though would I be in a business meeting and I'd have somebody lean over and be like, shh, you can't talk like shh, right? Guess what? Triggers my shame, makes me shrink down, makes me feel small, makes me bite my tongue, right? With my wife, I actually elevate, my chest puffs, my heart starts racing, I get a little angry. The reality of it is I have 5 or 6 different ways that shame moves through my body. I had to understand what those are. Right? Same thing with anger. Anger is like probably 4 or 5 different ways that anger shows up in my body. I have to understand what those are, because until I understand the early indicators my body tells on what's happening in my body, I can't really listen to it until I understand them. But our body gives us everything we need if we actually pay attention. So when we understand how it moves through our body, right? With shame, I've got these things. So if I've got 5 different shame triggers, now I need to understand how does it move in my world. And what I mean by that is, what triggers my shame? Is it how my wife looks at me? Is it how she asks a question? Is it how I show up in a professional environment? Is it how people might shame me about the fact that, right, I look different or act different or what? I mean, truly, like, where do I get triggered by shame? Right? Because then I can start matching those 5 areas that I feel it moving through my body to the triggers, and I can get ahead of it so that I can be very aware, and in those moments, pause, take a breath, ask myself if what I'm seeing in front of me is actually true or if it's connected to my emotional trigger, and allow me to choose a different path in those moments. So once that root's pulled, this is where we create new patterns. So truly, it was only maybe 6 months ago that this framework was developed in a way to articulate it. But you asked me how I've done this.
Yes.
This is exactly what I've done with everything that's kept me stuck in my world, is to become aware, take ownership, true ownership, right? Unroot and start to move through it. But here's what the world tells us. I got to give you the other side, because the world tells us outside in.
Yes.
Okay. Movement's the outside ring. But guess what? The world tells us to move, but what they're telling us to do is we got to move fast. We got to act fast. We got to think fast. We got to show up with a smile on. So we don't have time to feel. There's literally books that are called Fuck Your Feelings. Yep. Like, no, we are feeling human beings, and human connection without emotion and feeling is not human connection. Okay. So the reality of it is they tell us to do this. Guess what? They're asking us to mask. They don't want us to move. They want us to mask. Right? Which means that we're not unrooting, we're further setting our root system. So let's just reverse engineer this, right? Okay. Now all of a sudden we've gone to mask. Now we're setting in a root system. Guess what? That's when we're victims instead of having ownership. We're a victim. Well, the world did this to me. This job did this to me. My wife did this to me. My boss did this to me. You're a victim. And how can you ever be aware when you have those first 3 things starting it? So instead you're blind. Again, we've got blinders on and we are literally operating in the unconscious. Yeah. So it's all rooted in awareness and intentionality. It's all rooted in trust, surrender, and breathe. But this inside out method is a framework that hopefully people can apply in their lives right now.
It so makes sense as well, because just like what you're saying, what society or what the world wants us to do is to get over it fast and move on to the next thing without taking care of it. I absolutely love your inside out approach.
If we don't feel, we don't heal.
No. Period. Yeah. And also it reinforces your shame when you don't heal those emotions, right, those feelings that you have, right? It's right, reinforcing the shame, which right, everything else is coming out of.
100%.
Yeah. And guess what? Each explosion gets bigger and bigger and bigger right, and bigger because you've never taken care of that root.
That's exactly right. And so here's the thing I like to say as well, and you just put this back into my mind. The reality of it is when we mask, when we bottle up, when we literally have armor around us to carry this, not only is the armor literally crushing us, but often our armor is so tight that air can't escape. Mm-hmm. So what happens? We keep layering in more stuff. We keep masking. We keep cutting the top of that weed off. Literally, the pressure inside that armor starts to build up until at some point it will explode. Again, neutralize and diffuse. Otherwise, we're creating bombs left and right. If we fight, we will literally create bombs in our world.
Wow. So what would you say to anybody that's in the position that they need to be diffusing and taking care of the root? What would you tell them is the first thing that they need to do right now?
Trust, surrender, breathe.
Amen. I knew it was going to be something like that.
But honestly, I would just really challenge yourself to challenge your own perspective, right? Like if you feel like your spouse or your boss or somebody's like doing something to you, you feel like you're just getting the rough end of the stick. If you did nothing else but try to recognize that if you could truly create a narrative that you could take ownership for everything in your life, even if you don't believe it, fight and argue with yourself until you can justify that everything bad that's happened to you is actually your fault in some way or another. It's a crazy exercise. And I'm not sitting here telling you that that's the case, but when we truly take ownership to its fullest extent, right? This is one of the things I loved about Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership. And I didn't steal this from him, but it's just the truth. When we put ourselves in ownership, it's nobody else's problem. And guess what? If we take ownership, just like I did in that scenario where I apologized for something that I'm not even sure she was upset about, only good can happen. Like truly, if we take ownership and we put ourselves in a position to neutralize and diffuse, it will happen. So challenge your perspective. And if you're blind or stuck and you don't know how to challenge your own perspective, ask for other people's perspectives. What are the things that I'm stuck on? What are things that I keep doing in my life that are patterns that keep repeating themselves that you see are creating damage for me or for others in my life? If there was one thing that I do that you could remove from my day-to-day life, what would it be? If there was something that I do that's additive in your world that you could steal from me, what would that be? Ask questions to seek perspective, because perspective and pain both point us at what's important and they both teach us lessons if we're listening. So seek perspective. And if you're stuck, that means you're feeling pain. Guess what? That's your first indication.
So good. So good. And it's a matter of asking yourself too, is like, do you want to continue to give someone else the opportunity to victimize you, or you want to take control and take that ownership, like what you're saying? And I don't want to use the word control because way too often the control aspect becomes a negative. But taking ownership is only a positive from my viewpoint and from my perspective. And that's where you can decide that instead of being that victim to maybe a low emotional intelligence, you can become that victor in owning the emotions that you're feeling and finding out why.
Yeah. And then we can show up in rooms and actually set the tone, right? By doing this, we allow ourselves to become the thermostat, not the thermometer.
Yep. We can change the atmosphere just by stepping in, right? I love that. That is so good. So if you had anything that you needed to change, or that now that you didn't know back then, what would you take back to your 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old self to be able to maybe catapult even quicker into where you are now? Because you are at such a fabulous place, and I can't wait for people to hear more about what you're doing.
I know this sounds crazy, but I wouldn't change anything. I will go to the point of answering your question for the sake of advice, but truly I wouldn't change anything, because I would not be where I am now if it was not for everything that I've been through and all of the stuff that I've had to experience.
Yes.
So probably what I would say to myself then, which is something that I say to my 7-year-old son now. So it's no different. It's very simple. Who you are is perfect. And do what makes your heart happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful in its simplicity. And it's so full of truth and great foundation, right? Because again, you're teaching him who he is. He can be completely safe and confident in who he is. And that is what you said we need very first, right? Is that safety in ourselves. I love it. And yet I also will speak to the other part that you said, is that you wouldn't want to change anything because you wouldn't be who you are. And I agree 100% with you that every opportunity that is difficult, anything that doesn't kill us, we can actually design to make us the best self that we can be. It will make us more powerful.
It comes down to how much are we studying our lives, right? Like I said that earlier, but that's exactly right. I mean, if you can look back and literally have a clearing process every night, right? Once you get into the rhythm of doing this, I'm now in the place where I'm doing this. I wasn't a year ago. I wasn't 2 years ago. I wasn't 5 years ago, right? So I want to be really clear, like there is no final destination. It's only a constant evolution of self. But like literally every single day, I'm going through this process of, I'm now so in tune with my body and my mind and the way that they're connected that I'm recognizing almost real time when I get triggered. And I can answer those questions real time on, oh, is this real? Is it not real? And if it's something I don't understand, I can put it into a container. Not compartmentalize and put it away, put it in a container that I'm going to reopen later. Okay. Once I have something in that container, then at the end of the night, what I do is I open up however many containers I've had to set aside. And I literally just go through a place of trying to process the situation and remove myself from just having like right now in my own perspective, but how do I see it from 360 degrees? Let's challenge it from a higher perspective. What could have happened? Right. And then when I'm able to do that, I'm able to actually clear myself to recognize where are the areas where I was triggered, where are the areas that bombs might develop, where are the areas that I need to create repair. And then I can remove that resistance and energy drain from my life real quick. And I'm also able to apply those lessons real fast. So when I say that all the lessons that we need are already in our lives, it's not just in our past, it's not in our future, it's also in our present. The reality of it is if people can start looking at their lives as the greatest thing they study, you will have lots of moments to grow and develop if you truly look at your life as a book to study. You are writing the narrative of your life. Do not hand the pen over to anybody else. And when you read back on what's happened, whether it's 10 years ago or 10 minutes ago, what would the editor say on how do we improve it to make sure that the story continues to grow?
Yes, you are writing your own book. Your life is your story. Make it better each day.
And it's also the only book you need to study because it's your lessons.
Yes, Right. And as long as you are progressing and moving forward, and I loved your example of using the container to take those moments or those situations that you don't understand, because once you put them aside for a moment of time, you're also giving yourself the ability to step outside of the emotion of that moment. And so you can see things so much more clear.
Yeah. And then if you can't see it clearly yourself, right? Like there was a night last week that I struggled, and it was at this event. It was with this one interaction and 2 or 3 others that took place that day. I didn't see them clearly. Talked to a friend about it, and then I processed it all with my wife for about an hour. Here's what happened. Here's what I think. Here's how are we doing it. So again, I'm not suggesting you have to have all the answers yourself 100% of the time, but seek perspective internally and then externally.
Yes, yes. So I know that we've got a lot of people that'll be listening to this episode, and they'll be in a dark spot. They're going to be in a difficult time. And so I think that what we're really saying to them is it's like, be looking forward always, be willing to change, be willing to grow by looking at what you've done in the past that has gotten you to where you are now, but never give up and always do the next right thing.
Yeah. Well, and the reality of it is too, is if they're in the dark place, like, let's just remember this. We are all born as our brightest, most authentic burning light we will ever be. Okay. Anybody who has kids knows this. We see the rawness, the purity, the authenticity. We just see the instinct, the charisma. It bleeds out of them, right? Love bleeds out of them. Connection bleeds out of them. It's everything. And then what happens? Parents, teachers, coaches, employers start saying, you should do this, you should do that, you shouldn't do that. You should be this, you shouldn't be that. You should want this, you shouldn't want that. You should chase this amount of money, shouldn't chase that amount of money. You should have this car, not that car. No, no, no. Right. And we start funneling people down into this little box until they're once an empty vessel of once who they once were, just surrounded by all these layers that the world has placed on top of them, telling them who they are isn't good enough. Yes. Should in and of itself is a shame-based word. It implies whatever you're doing isn't good enough. So first and foremost, just remove should from your language, because that'll be a great place to start, and replace it with could or would. Instead of saying I should have gotten up to work out, say what could I do differently tomorrow? What would I have done differently if I didn't have to be up so late last night taking care of my kids? Give yourself some context and look at could and would versus should, which is shaming. And then also realize that to get back from that dark place, it's about shedding the layers so your own bright, burning, authentic light can shine in it.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so good. There are so many nuggets that you have given in this short time period, Brian. I just cannot thank you enough for that. But I would really love to give you the opportunity. I want to hear more about your vision, this billion people that you're going to impact by 2045. How are you doing that? What's going on in your life and your world that you're expanding to so many people's lives?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, a billion lives is not going to be done alone. It's going to be done collectively, right? So it's not about my impact. It's about the collective impact by surrounding ourselves with a lot of beautiful people who want to also have impact.
Yes.
So I just have to start by saying that it's not my impact, it's ours. Right now we have multiple business verticals that are attempting to do this, and it's all rooted in the who, right? I believe holistically in determining who we are, getting back to the core of who we are, determining who we're doing this for, and understanding who we're trying to impact. And when we understand that everything's rooted in the who, each one of our entities has some element of focusing on who in a different way. So we've got our coaching, our speaking, our courses, our online communities. It's called No Limits You, for obvious reasons, right? I believe that people can either be limited or limitless, but it's their choice. And we can give frameworks to help free people along that path. This is truly dialed in to help people discover who they are, deal with emotional triggers, embrace pain to avoid suffering, and understand who they're doing this for very clearly. Okay. Then we have a sales, reach, and automation type business. We're leveraging AI, but we're leveraging AI and the actual artificial intelligence with the AI that we've developed, which is awareness and intentionality to understand how to craft messages to create connections. So right now we work primarily in a one-to-one targeted way in LinkedIn to be able to help demonstrate who you are to the world and attract who you want to impact in a very one-to-one targeted way with curated messages that don't feel like automation, that don't feel like cold spammy, that are really focused on the who am I and who are you and how do we build a relationship together, regardless of what can I get for you. It's what do I want or how can I help you? Totally different narrative. But what's great about that is we're converting in cold invites 20 to 25% higher than any other industry platform that's using it because of the way that we message it. Then we've got a podcast and PR business where we're curating conversations, focusing on download growths and really aligning audience. Because we all know, and you're a podcast host, how many times you get hit up by a booking service and it's like, we have the perfect guest for your show. Yes. And the reality of it is half the time they haven't even looked up your show or they've done a simple template. And that's not how we operate. I have been able to leverage podcasts very effectively. I've been on, I think, 250 to 300 now over the last year. And the reality of it is it's a really cool space with some incredible people. So we are focusing on download numbers, but we're also doing a rev share with the podcast host, which no other booking services are doing. So we've got truly skin in the game, but this is how to demonstrate who you are to the world and track who you want in an evergreen shotgun fashion, right? In a way that we can truly create those paths. And then obviously in each one of those, we're helping people structure how to actually build their platforms, their systems, their followings. And on the right side, we've got what we call Who Stories. It's a content and media management company, but we've got a really big initiative right now where we're telling the who stories of the who's of the world. So we've got a very highly curated approach with studios in different parts of the country where we are truly telling the stories that haven't been told by a lot of the names that already have been seen in the world. So we've got a really impressive list of the top 20. We're working in that. But when you ask, how do we do this? It's through multiple initiatives, through multiple efforts. And we've also got another group that we're working on that's really creating a movement that we will be launching probably in the next 18 months to create some massive action and momentum around this outside of our entities. But that's high level what we're working on. And we're truly here just to serve the who.
It's amazing. And I love that, the who before the what. That is, I mean, that's a complete mindset shift, another shift there, thinking about the people and making the right connections. I love that you're doing that on LinkedIn, by the way, because all of those spammy messages that you get constantly, and it's not even coming from a real person, or it's just a copy and paste. No, we don't respond. I don't want that. I don't want to waste my time on that because you don't care about me. So that who is absolutely, I love it. I'm going to look into so much of what you just said myself, by the way. And so I would love for people to know how they can actually get connected with you, how they can follow you, where they can learn more about what you're doing.
Yep. One of the greatest places to go that has a lot of what we just referenced in each 4 entities, go to IamNoLimits.com. If you want to follow me directly, you can go to @BogertBrian. Another resource for a lot of our content that's out there is my website, brianbogert.com. At the end of the day, we said we want to impact 1 billion lives. And I will say this very clearly. We realize that 99.99999999999% that we impact will never pay us $1. And we are very okay with that. You talked about social stalking me. We create a lot of free content out there genuinely to elevate and empower. So here's my ask. We don't have a bunch of stuff with calls to actions. We don't have a bunch of sales funnels. Yes, there's ways you can get in touch with us. Yes, there's ways you can get free downloads. We're running a business, but I want to be very clear. If you see anything that we produce that resonates, connects, like genuinely, it moves you, I just ask you to share it in some way, like, comment, and share. I don't even care if it's done on the social platforms. Take your phone and turn it to the person sitting next to you. I don't care. It's not about the vanity metrics. It's about the impact. So we need all the help we can get there for collective impact. And again, moved people move people. So if you find yourself getting moved, figure out how to move more people.
Yeah. Okay. That is so good and so simple. All right, guys, you heard that. Just go and check him out. And by the way, he's got this Bogert's Bullets. I absolutely love these little short videos. He's done them with his wife. He does them with his kids. Amazing things. I mean, out riding his bike, he's got this camera on like all of the time. It's super amazing the way he's able to pedal and talk and keep up the momentum the way that he does. But you've got to go and check those out. But do this guy a solid and get it sharing the information. And if this really resonates, then connect with him at a higher level and take advantage of more of the information that he has. Because I got to tell you, you served me today. And so I know that you're going to serve so many people that listen to this podcast as well. This episode, by the way, your title is "You're Lucky to Be Alive. What now?" And you know what I love, especially at the end of this episode, thinking about that, is not only does it pertain to your accident when you were 7 years old, that opportunity that put you on this whole different path, it pertains to every single person that woke up this morning.
It does.
Every single one of us.
We are all lucky to be alive.
Every single one of us. If we just think about it that way, every circumstance that we find ourselves in will be easier to handle.
It's the truth. Amen. I reflect on that often when I look back at the kids that were in the hospital with me who did not win their fight. I'm still here. Yeah. I don't ever take that for granted.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Well, is there any last nugget that you'd like to leave with the audience before we say goodbye today?
Yeah. I'll leave with a really quick one because it's right on the point you just made. The reality of it is anybody listening to this here is already a gift because you're here. You've survived whatever's happened to you in your life already. You're here. It's probably been a painful journey. Guess what? It has been for everybody. We all have those moments. The one thing about pain that we can guarantee is that we will all experience it. We don't have to experience suffering. Stop looking outside for the answers. Stop looking for a hero. Stop looking for a savior. Turn inward. Begin your internal journey, because the only person who can save you, the only person who can be your hero, and the only person who can take you from surviving to thriving is you.
Exclamation point, mic drop. Thank you,
There you go, Marcy.
so much. Thank you so much, Brian. I truly appreciate you. And I know that everybody that listens to this episode will be blessed by everything that you shared today. So thank you so much for being my guest today on the Your Blank What Now podcast. Thank you.